We're behind the blue. There we go. Right. Position. Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I'm your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Mortal Kombat! But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we like to talk about games, and we've reviewed quite a lot of video game movies at this point. Mortal Kombat is just the latest in a long string of them, which came to HBO Max and also theaters. Did you watch it on HBO Max or in theaters?
I did. The theaters near me don't open for another couple of weeks at least.
Fair enough. Okay.
I don't know if I've talked about this much in the cast, but I am a big fan of the original Mortal Kombat. In a so bad it's good kind of way. I have watched that movie probably more times than any other movie save the Star Wars original trilogy.
Did we watch that movie together? I watched it in college once.
I watched it in college many times.
I honestly don't remember watching it, to be completely real.
Yeah, so
it's one of those things that, like, I know it happened, but I don't have any memory of like what that was actually like.
The first time I watched it in college, I was sitting around with friend of the cast, Charles, and it was Intercession. We were like, "What's a good movie to
Intercession? I loved Intercession.
To watch a movie to drink to, right? Because it's like, young, wild, whatever. And so it was like, Mortal Kombat, is that stupid enough to drink to? And you hit play, and the New Line Cinema logo appears as the Mortal Kombat theme. So it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely it. And it's been a long and storied tradition for me and Charles just watching get plastered while watching it. So this movie had a lot to live up to. But I've also watched Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Don't like it as much just because it is so bad that like it goes back out of like so bad it's good into like too bad to like even be fun. But it still has a little bit of that. But before we get into the spoiler territory, I guess, what are your impressions of Mortal Kombat 2021?
It's bad. And I want to say it's like bad in a recommendable way. I tweeted that it was bad. And then I tweeted, wait, no, this is good, which was actually a joke, but I don't think people took it as a joke because the final fight is good. And that's it. And honestly, only a percentage of it, right? Without any spoilers, there is a 5-ish minute stretch at the very end of the movie that is legitimately super cool and interesting, that pays off something that, pops up in the beginning of the movie that is sweet. And that moment is good. The rest of it is awful. It's just like so unwatchably awful that I can't recommend it, I don't think.
From my perspective, it is more normal bad than it is so bad it's good. There are some moments.
Yeah.
And it did a lot better than I expected it to. I expected it to just be like agonizingly mediocre. But there are some moments, like I think Kano is fantastic. I'll leave it there. But I don't think he's enough to hold up the whole movie. I think the acting is kind of god awful everywhere, which is kind of surprising. And yeah, I think I'm with you. Like I think if you were like me, a fan of the original Mortal Kombat, then you could get something out of watching this. But other than that, I don't think I can recommend it. Although I do hope it gets a sequel, because we'll talk about it in the spoiler section. But there's some hints about the front of the cast.
I hope a sequel from like a completely different team. Can I get a sequel from just like a better director and like better actors? You know what I mean? Like that would make me happy.
Nick asks if you're a fan of the game. If it's worth noting, there's some cool Easter eggs, I think, and they do a lot. But there's some other stuff that I think is kind of like wonky. Like we'll get into it in the spoiler section. But as a fan of the games, it is fairly true to the lore, especially some of the newer lore. Like so. Part of the thing is that the Mortal Kombat video game story is very dumb, but it's evolved significantly over the past 15. I guess it's more like
you mean 30 years?
Yeah,
it was the 90s when this came out.
Yeah. The past like 20 to 30 years.
Are you super familiar with it? I've played a lot of the Mortal Kombat games, and I vaguely, really the only thing I knew about the lore is there was a tournament. I guess.
Several of
And
them. Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, several. That it surrounds a tournament, right?
Yeah.
Like the core plot, device of Mortal Kombat is it's a tournament. But
Yeah.
I really don't know any of the other lore besides that. Oh,
So
and
I
that Sub-Zero and Scorpion fucking hate each other. I knew that
Yeah.
too.
So I knew some of it mostly because I was inspired to go look it up when the Super Best Friends did like they did one of their short videos on Mortal Kombat 11, which is where it gets really fucking insane because that's when they reset the timeline. Raiden sends everybody back in time to before the first Mortal Kombat tournament to try and like screw with history. And so the plot is effectively reset as of MK9 or MKX, but like canonically reset, right? Like there's like some things that like echo back and forth between the timelines. Yeah, it's
Okay.
weird. Um,
That is a little weird for sure.
but like so I don't think this is too spoilery because it's in like the first look of Mortal Kombat, but like um Sub Zero's real name being Bihan, I believe is a post or is it's definitely a post original Mortal Kombat plot development. Um like like and I think it's a post reset like reveal, right? Like theoretically his name was always that, but it's not a thing we knew. Um, so it's fairly, yeah. I don't know. Like if you're a fan of the games, um, yeah. So this is some other deep lore that Nick's bringing up. So there are two Sub Zeros. One is the younger brother of the first one. The first one dies, I believe, in the original Mortal Kombat and comes back as Noob Saibot. Which is itself like Noob Saibot. It appears in Mortal Kombat 2, but it's not revealed that he's the original Sub Zero until later. And I think it's technically a retcon. Um, and then like they hate each other because like Scorpion in the games has always been undead, and he was always originally killed by the original Sub Zero. And then Sub Zero, and then in the first game, Scorpion kills Sub Zero, and then his little brother is mad at him for killing his brother, and they're from a clan of the Lin Kuei, which they go into. There's a lot of weirdness in the Mortal Kombat lore, like like Quan Chi has like a soul NATO, and like might be trying like it's all very strange and
Well, I guess we could talk about the details in the spoiler section,
yeah.
but for now, this is one of the first movies I feel like that we both just flat don't recommend. A lot of the time, I give very cautious recommendations. Like I say, like, oh well, if such and such, but like there are just really no circumstances that I would be comfortable saying, like, watch this movie. This is a good use of 2 hours. Like,
Yeah,
I just don't feel like it is.
yeah, yeah. No, I almost want to recommend it just to like watch like Kano because I think he's legitimately like cheesy enough to like he's like the core of kind of like the so bad it's good level of stuff, right? He's just
Okay.
I like he reminds me of like Bison in Street Fighter in the Street Fighter movie. Um, but yeah, we should probably move into the spoiler tutor now. Spoilers for Mortal Kombat. Spoilers for probably MK 90, or I think it was 95 and Annihilation. Uh, spoilers for Mortal Kombat game lore. Sorry if you got spoiled by the reset thing. That game's like 10 years old at this point. Um, what else are we probably gonna spoil? I don't know. Spoilers in general.
Spoilers for all this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really I think the opening scene is good in a very straightforward. It's kind of like Magneto in those X-Men movies. It's not hard to make good opening scenes because you don't have a lot going on. You don't have like big plot momentum or
Yeah.
anything to worry about. You can just kind of make like these like and it's like a little vignette that's like completely removed from the rest of the story. So that stuff was good. Then
Also,
the
no
rest
one
of
is
the movie
speaking English,
happens.
so we
Also,
just
no one is speaking English. Also, it's like very sincere and almost like heartfelt. Like it really wants you to like take it seriously, which I was like, okay, well, the first movie's pretty like me or whatever, and so I appreciate that they're trying to pull on your heartstrings, make a real cogent emotional argument here to connect with the character, whatever his name's Hanzo Hasada or whatever he'll
Kanto
become.
Sashi, who is the birth name of Scorpion.
Scorpion,
Yeah.
yeah. And then it gets so bad and dumb from there that it makes me almost like angry. Because there's no tournament. This is the thing that
Yeah.
kills me, man. Like, what on earth are they thinking having a movie where the core premise is there is a tournament between these two realms and then there's no fucking tournament?
Yeah.
Like the whole movie seems like it's building to this like climactic tournament where you're gonna have different people like pair off, but instead they do that sort of in the middle, and it's just like, wait, so I guess that we're just fighting now? They're fighting? Okay, that's fine, I guess, or whatever. And then it just like ends. And then, Scorpion shows up and fights Sub-Zero, which is legitimately cool. And again, pays off the earnest, well set up drama from the first 7 minutes. And then he disappears. Actually, the Scorpion fight is good when it is just Scorpion versus Sub-Zero. Then the other guy comes in, like Scorpion's, you know,
Descendant.
yeah, he shows up and they like team up against Sub-Zero, at which point I think it sucks. And most of the action in this movie sucks, like really bad.
Yeah. No.
Some of the fatalities themselves are cool in a like brutal moment, but the
al-
action itself is filmed
al-
incredibly poorly.
Also in the that's from the game type moment, right?
Yeah,
Um, like the Quan Lao, the buzzsaw hat finisher is from the game.
yeah.
Um,
Pulling
and
the heart out
yeah,
is obviously something from the game. Um,
yeah.
I don't know. What about his soul suck? Is that from the game? I don't even know
Your
that
soul,
guy's name.
your soul is
Shang.
mine. Is Shang Tsung. Shang Tsung
Yeah,
is one of the characters that did not like they got the original Shang Tsung to voice act Shang Tsung in the latest Mortal Kombat, and they should have just gotten him back for this movie because he's another like very hammy character from the first. Your soul is mine. It's just so iconic from him. Um, uh, and like what is it? And the dragon that uh, I'm sorry, I'm not a
Liu Kang. Yeah, yeah,
Liu
yeah,
Kang.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
His fire dragon. That's
Liu
also
Kang.
from the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick in the chat says it's so weird that the combat is bad because these are all great action actors. I absolutely agree. I think it's all on the camera. They're edited insanely poorly, and I'm just like, how are I get the sense that it's almost like they didn't shoot enough to like have good things to cut kind of like two in between, because I was just felt I felt constantly disoriented, and I don't actually think the choreography was all that bad, right? Like the fights themselves were pretty whatever. I mean, like some of them were pretty boring, like Jax versus the other big guy who was just like, if you want to have like two heavy strong boys fight each other, them just like punching on that bridge was like so insanely lame and stupid.
Yeah.
But so for instance, the action with Sonya and Kano in her like trailer, like I get on paper, that's actually it's geography that we're well aware of. They are well established in terms of their fighting styles because we've seen them in previous action scenes. But like because of maybe just like shooting in that space was hard. I just could not for the life of me like follow the action well because of the way the shots were shot, and it was edited most of the time. um I think it's breaking like the 180-degree rule all the time, which is part of the problem. I don't know, I just really hated the action in this movie up until the stuff with Scorpion and Sub-Zero.
I would tend to agree. I could tell from or something from the beginning that stuck out at me is like they were focused on making the fights very bloody. That's a very Mortal Kombat like versus Street Fighter thing, right? Like Mortal Kombat was shocking in the '90s as a game because it was bloody, and don't let your kids play this game or it'll turn them into school shooters or something, right? Like it's like one of
Mhm.
those games, right? Like it's one of the foundational games in that kind of like moment in video game history. Um, uh, but so that like calling back that's neat, but I think that it feels like they wanted to focus on that maybe a little too much. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but like it seems like highlighting the goriness came at the expense of making it compelling.
Yeah.
Um,
I also think that a lot of the locations were not great. Like that sand pit in that temple, it was just like what an intensely boring place to stage a
yeah,
fight scene, right? Um, though, I guess that's half true, half not true. I also didn't really like the frozen MMA arena at the end, which I thought was kind of weird and lame. I think Sub-Zero was actually handled very well in the movie from a narrative perspective. Um, but I don't know. It's not even like him freezing. It's not like there were any issues with the fact that Sub-Zero had frozen this place and it was like he's fighting on his home turf or something like that. But, I don't know. I just
Yeah.
felt like the thing that made the Scorpion and Sub-Zero fights, both the one at the beginning and the end that work really well, is that they it was very zoomed out and there was just like a lot of room to take in what was going on, right? Like first you have Scorpion kind of fighting the mooks with the kunai on the rope. That stuff was all great. Then you had just him versus Sub-Zero, which was a little bit worse because they get close in places where I didn't think that that was good. And then the end was just, it was just like them fucking fighting. I don't even know how to explain it, but like Koro versus Cole
Well,
Young, who is the OC that gets made for this movie. Um, like that fight was just, I don't know. I just did not think it was. I did not think it was very
yeah,
good.
no, I would agree. Like, and like I just don't think it. I don't know. Like what I would have wanted. I think the comparison, because you drew this comparison also to like the Avengers, right? Like, I think you want the Sub Zero Scorpion Cole fight to be like Cap and Bucky versus Iron Man, and it's not, right? Like it's just kind of like whatever. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, there's also a lot of like little weird things in here, right? Like, I thought the opening was fun, but or like pretty good, but like it's just kind of tough to follow. Like, one of them speaking Chinese, one of them speaking Japanese. They have to like flag that in the subtitles. I just don't think that works well. Also, like I half expected like Cole to like look at Hanzo as he's talking and be like, "I don't speak Japanese," because like there's no indication that he does, right?
Yeah, that's true. I actually thought that he was gonna end up fighting Scorpion, to be honest. My expectation for like the big twist was that because Scorpion is just a vengeful spirit from hell or whatever, that Cole was going to have to like Cole and Scorpion work together to defeat Sub-Zero, but then Cole needs to 1v1 Scorpion. That was going to be like the big twist, but that did not end up being the big twist.
Yeah,
Um, I think part of it is that like a lot of these are framed as superhero fights, which I think is probably incorrect. Really, I think this should be more like a kung fu sort of
yeah,
movie, like a true kind of martial arts sort of movie, rather than a movie that is like focusing on the superpowers. Because even in the games themselves, right, like the like the powers are what make the different fighters unique, obviously, and they're a pretty like core piece of the characters, but like the it was smart of them in that Sub-Zero fight for Sub-Zero to make an ice blade and just kind of go for blade against Scorpion, right? Where it wasn't all that much about his ability to like create ice
yeah,
stuff versus his fight with Jax, which also sucked, which was a lot about his like ability to like create ice stuff. Because at the end of the day, I don't really think the Mortal Kombat guys are superheroes, and I don't think like the powers themselves are sort of like flavors to be added in a sense, um rather than like the core defining feature uh
yeah. No,
of each individual fight scene.
I think you could have like made it all like I don't think like a pure martial arts is the right frame. I think it's something more like wuxia, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, for sure, for sure.
like almost Watchmen, right? Which is I think the right kind of like action tone for it, if that makes sense. I also like kind of in that vein. I didn't like and this is a plot point. The like the Mortal Kombat mark being like the thing that unlocks your powers, right? Like
Oh my god, that's so dumb, and I
yeah,
hate it so much. I mean, I hate this in a general sense. Like, I don't like Chosen One stuff. I think Chosen One stuff is pretty played out. In like a grander sense. This is
mm,
this is a pretty common, thought, but like how, in the Spider-Man movies before the Tom Holland Spider-Man, it was because like he had special DNA that his dad did whatever to. It's like no, like I the stuff that makes it just feels like lazy, I guess is what it feels like. It also adds weird plot elements that are pretty stupid in like why is Sonya Blade hanging out for the entirety of the movie? And it's like we all know, oh, it's because she's gonna beat up fucking Kano at the end and steal his thing. But it's just like it makes no sense for her for Raiden to bring her into the temple. It makes no sense for her to be,
I mean, yeah, and to be
kind of
fair,
included along all of this other,
and it
stuff.
makes no sense for for Kano's power to be like an eye laser. Like, what does that even mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
it makes no sense for like Jax's power to be like his arms. Like,
Yeah, he regrows his arms. Just have it be the the cybernetics thing.
yeah.
Like
Well, it's Kano's
I
with
don't
the
know
cyber.
why that it has to be more complicated than that.
Yeah, not only, but like picking Kano and Jax, who are like science characters, is in Mortal Kombat, is like for the movie, just like doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Like, yeah, um, it's and it's like Sony doesn't really have any special. Neither does Johnny Cage, but Johnny Cage isn't in this movie, but he was teased at the end. Like, it looks like he's gonna like if they make him like I want a sequel because it looks like they're gonna cast John Cena as Johnny Cage. And that would make me so fucking happy. Um,
That would also make me happy, I think. I
um,
mean, why do you want Johnny Cage so bad? Just
I
because he's the main character, like he's the
So
central.
I don't necessarily want him so bad. I just think John Cena as Johnny Cage would be
Okay.
hilarious.
I
Um,
guess maybe he's not the main character. Liu Kang is kind of the main
yeah. So
character.
this was, I think, a
Liu Kang is like the Luke Skywalker, whereas Johnny Cage is like Han Solo, I guess maybe is what I'm
yeah.
describing.
I think this is actually a big misstep in the first movie, which like I said, it's so trash that it's fun. But like they make Johnny Cage the main character, and then Liu Kang goes back and forth between like being like the serious, like the straight man, and like a jokey character, which I think doesn't work well. Um, Again, who cares because it's bad, but
Hmm.
but that's the point, right? Like Liu Kang is supposed to be the main character, and Johnny Cage is supposed to be the Lancer, right? Like he's supposed to be like the wisecracker, um, which this movie was picked up by Kano for most of the movie, and like I said in the beginning, I think it's fantastic. I think he's hammy enough that it's actually hilarious. He was like by far my favorite part of the movie. I think he generally kind
You know
of
what's
stole
funny?
the
I've been
show.
watching Futurama recently, and he really reminded me of Bender, which I thought was great. Because I think Bender is a
Yeah,
very hard character to get right, who is like the jerk ass, but also like not so jerky that you have this question of like, why are they hanging out with this person? That was like adequately answered by the movie. I think the real person that suffered from this was Sonya, because it was just like, why the fuck is she there if
yeah,
she doesn't have the mark? Um,
yeah.
and just keeps getting like dragged dragged to each set point, because we know in the end she's going to be, she's Sonya Blade. She has to be there. It also felt weird that she didn't get her mark from killing, like, can you not get the mark from killing the people from, what is it, Outworld, Otherworld, what is it called?
Yeah, I mean, none of them were shown to have marks in the first place, right? Like Cabal is evidently from
Yeah,
Earthrealm.
Cabal
So
is from Earthrealm, but
also
he
sounds like
fights.
like he sounds like Lou Albano. Like he sounds like Mario from like the old Mario movie, which I thought was hilarious.
I don't know. I hated that. I thought that was very dumb. Kano had, which is weird to say, the guy who betrays the team has more right to be there on the team than
Yeah.
Sonya Blade did. But
Yeah, I was hoping Kano would get like a, I may be a scumbag, but I'm an Earthrealmer, right? Like type of deal, but no, he died. He died to like that was like a very kind of like Chekhov's gun type of thing with the garden gnome, I guess, but it was also very
mhm.
lame, right? She kind of like pokes
Yep.
him in the eye and he dies. He pokes him in like the laser eye too, right? Like, which apparently works like apparently like gets shorted out by acetone, I guess. This like it I I'm
And
sorry.
the thing, the acetone thing confused me so much. I think I would have liked that fight scene if maybe it was more like legible what was going to
Yeah.
happen. Like, so for instance, when someone, like, there's like the action movie linguistics of, there's oil on a road and there's a spark nearby, right? Because you understand the intrinsic properties of a flammable object and flame, that the thing is going to burst into flames. But like, I don't know what is the fuck is acetone? What interaction is acetone going to have with his super magic eye? I have no way to understand what Sonya is doing in that moment. And so it like shorts his eye out and he can't use his eye for a second. And I was just like, how the fuck? First of all, how does Sonya know this? Second of all, how am I supposed to read that that is what Sonya is doing?
Right, and they could have had it just like kind of like explode, like like light on fire, right? Because like that would have been
Yeah.
like bottle of chemical lighting on fire. I think is legible enough, right? Like,
Yeah, not to mention that Kano's iconic look is he's bald, right? It's that he is bald and he
uh,
has the one eye.
not
Or am
bald.
I wrong about that?
Little, I think pretty sure you're wrong about that.
Okay, fair enough. I might be substituting Kano for like some other bald character with one eye, I guess.
Oh, but it's a cybernetic eye, right? Like it's he's like
Yeah,
it's covered in metal, and it's like a um like half of Cyclops, like Cyclops, but like he has his other eye. Um,
yeah.
uh, but yeah. Uh, oof, Nick has linked an image. Let me see if
Okay, yeah, he does have hair, so
yeah.
I'm wrong about that one.
Yeah, but like there's a bunch of little things like this that like kind of like annoy me. Like like I am near positive, like that when they're escaping, like Kung Lao's hat just kind of like jumps to them for no reason. I think it's entirely because like my guess is that they filmed the scene where like Liu Kang was like mourning over the hat and they didn't have a good reason why it like there's no reason it should like leap off the ground like into the portal with them. It doesn't make any sense. Like it's like you know it's some like this is like the nitpicky bullshit stuff, but there's like so much of it, right? Like there's so much like little dumb stuff, and I wasn't expecting anything great, but like, I mean, it keeps it from being a good movie, but it's also like, I wonder if I tried to quantify like what makes it's just like so like generically bad and not like hamily bad, be like fun. I don't know. I don't know. I wish it was worse.
Yeah, I watched a YouTube video recently from have you seen this video? It's the Dan Olson like just I called it a snuff film on Twitter. It's such a brutal takedown of Doug Walker's The Wall, and he likens Doug's like incurious confidence as the thing that makes Doug Walker in this instance the Neil Breen or Tommy Wiseau of YouTube, right? That he has these intensely basic and uninteresting opinions that he states with such effort and confidence that it becomes like a spectacle in and of itself, right? Which I think is actually a pretty okay recipe when we are like when we're diagnosing what makes the Neil Breens or the Tommy Wiseaus of the world so compelling, right? Neil Breen thinks that he is making incredibly affecting cinema about these heart-wrenching, you know, good and evil stories, right? But we all recognize and we can see the difference, right? We can see the distinction between the thing it wants to be and the thing it is, right? Or like Tommy Wiseau thinks he's making an Oscar-worthy film here, and he's it is a very serious work of art to him that is telling a serious story about like a man betrayed to him, but to the rest of us we just can't get past how poorly like how poorly made the product is. This I don't think has those kinds of aspirations really, so like without that there's no juxtaposition. Do you know what
Sure.
I mean?
Yeah, but I also feel like the original Mortal Kombat didn't have a ton of those aspirations either. But it's still like, and maybe that's just because like it's more hammy. Like the hamminess makes up for it, right? Like there's like a like you can get that by that earnestness with like chewing the scenery, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Um, I don't know. I also like part of me wants to wonder if like whether the illogic's based kind of like in the plot world or in like kind of like if a character behaves illogically, that's kind of funny, but like if the world just doesn't make sense, it's kind of distracting maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and it's also not like there's comedy in the moment to moment. You know, like sometimes you can get like this comedy inadvertently by making a like let's say like something that's funny in comedy is like quick and dramatic reversals, right? Where someone states something and then they state the obvious thing so quickly that you get that kind of like that comedic whiplash, right? Like a Futurama version of of this joke might be Professor Farnsworth talking about how dangerous this mission, and then saying, "Good news, your next mission is to do the exact same thing," right? The comedy there is that reversal. It's switching from this is dangerous and got my last crew killed to you're going to go
Yeah.
do this exact same thing, right? And I think you can sometimes with these so bad they're good movies find that comedy just on the poor writing alone. You know, like where like huge leaps in logic happen instantaneously, and you're just like, what where did that come from? You know, but like Mortal Kombat doesn't have any of that stuff on paper. I actually think that it does have a pretty legible, you know, like it's not good, and in fact I would argue it's pretty bad structure, but it is still like s- real structure, right? And doesn't do any of these like insane leaps from point A to point B that might otherwise be comedic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. Um yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh. Hmm. What else is happening in this movie? Cuz like I don't know, something that bothered me a lot is just like how bad all of the acting was. Like it was like I said, except for maybe Kano. And like Kano's not even good. He's just like not stilted, right? Like
Yeah.
um
I think a lot of it is exposition. There's so much exposition to learn, and it's practically meaningless, right? Like who really cares about Outland or going there or the way that it works or whatever? Just because like this is part of my thing about like the tournament not taking place. If the climax of this movie is a tournament, right? Or maybe the back half of the movie. It doesn't necessarily have to be the climax of the movie. Is this tournament in the same way that like honestly, like there are so many good examples of movies that make tournaments work, or you could just do a tournament arc out of a shonen anime, and it would be perfectly reasonable and fine in movie form. I think, right? Like, I mean, probably the most famous martial arts movie of all time, Enter the Dragon, is based on a martial arts tournament taking place. Obviously, um, so I feel like part of the issue is that there's so much exposition directing in this like pushing towards this direction that is like completely meaningless. I mean, just like how many minutes of this movie are wasted by like Sonya Blade telling me about the birthmark that means that you're a fighter for Earthrealm, but then the birthmark transfers. It's not even really a birthmark, it's just this marking that transfers from one person to the next, and also Outland is there, and also Outland is killing Earthrealm's champions. It's just like if you just went with something more simple and straightforward, would that really have killed you, Mortal Kombat movie? Did we really need all of this extra like lore?
that or like so what I thought what they were trying to do, and they didn't spend the extra 2 minutes to fucking explain this, is that like the thing that Raiden does at the end where he pairs them off. I thought like the what that was supposed to be was like, oh, he's like forcing the tournament to happen, right? By
Yeah.
like, and like if they just made it that, right? Like, and because like, you know, none of the bad guys act confused when Raiden like, lightning bolts them into a fight, right? Like they're like, okay, this is happening, right? And they don't like object, right? Like that would make sense if Raiden was like, look, the tournament's gonna happen. And I have, as an elder god, I have the right to make this happen, and so it's going to happen, and go, right? Like, at least like spend like the 15 seconds to explain that. And I think it makes like that aspect of it flow a little bit better, but just kind of like out there. And I think the reason they didn't do that maybe is because like none of the rest of it like acts like a tournament, right? Like, you know, uh, Sonya comes in and like helps finish off Kara, I think it is. Um like once she gets her powers, because they needed to show a scene where she had her powers, like because that's like the last time I maybe it's the last time we see her, but it's the last time like she does anything useful is like she like shoots Katara with her like wrist beams or something. Um the back half maybe just felt a lot rushed. I don't know.
And I just feel like all they had to do was just say, okay, the tournament starts here, and all of those fights happening under the guise of a tournament would have just solved so many dumb issues, right? Like like let's assume Shang Tsung shows up or whatever, Shang Liu shows up
Thanks, son.
and is like, I'm gonna fight your guys, and then Raiden is like, oh no, he's forcing the tournament to take place. Your time to train is over. Your 15 seconds of training is over. You're gonna have to like do it in the moment. You got the stakes, you've got the drama there, right? And now you're having these fights, and you can watch like a tournament structure play out a little bit, right? Like maybe Jax wins his first match by the skin of his teeth or whatever, and then his like his arms pop into place or something, and he fights in the next one. But then Sub-Zero kicks his ass because Sub-Zero is so fucking awesome, and kicks the shit out of, right, and it's like the real dragon in this instance. um and then Scorpion shows up at the last second to fight for Earthrealm, but not even really for Earthrealm, just because he really wants to like fuck up, Sub-Zero. Like, I think so much of this movie is just solved by not doing this Avengers shit and doing a tournament.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. Um, man, like it feels weird that the movie took 2 hours to go through, and it feels like there's like so little of substance actually in it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
There's a lot of fights that are very short and uninteresting. Like, I mean, like the Jax one that I talked about, like Jax versus what's his face. I think part of it is that like those fights probably needed more time to breathe, but they were like broken into a number of different pieces over the course of like I don't know how interesting or good Jax versus Sub-Zero in the first half is, and whether that earns its spot. And I almost sort of rather, like moments like that were pulled out. I also really hated Gordo versus Cole Young. I thought that was super lame. Um,
yeah, I mean the only point of that fight was to like force Cole into, in the most obvious thing ever, right? Like,
yeah.
defending his
I
family's
hate
gonna.
it. His whole thing with the family is so dumb. I hate these stories. It's my same complaint in Godzilla, where it's just like it just feels cheap and unearned, and like it's like, oh, the presence of a little daughter is gonna make him likable or relatable. It's just like, I don't need that. Just tell me that this guy, you know what I mean? Like John Wick does not need like a daughter that he's protecting. All he needs is just like a little tiny inciting incident, a little emotionality, and it's this fucking dog, right? And I'm good. I'm on his side. I am not a hard. I'm not. It's not hard to win me over and show me that the good guys are good, right? But it's just like, I don't know. At the end of it, the exact same thing happens where Sub-Zero is like freezing his daughter, and now Cole Young is like stopping the fight against Sub-Zero to like punch his daughter out of the
It's his
ice. And it's
wife.
just
He's
like, this
punching.
is so fucking stupid.
Yeah, yeah, no. I mean, it's like, because it's not like they put any like stakes on it either. It's not like, he feels like, it's not like they indicate that he needs to punch him out now, right? Like, and he doesn't even do that, right? Like at the end,
Yeah,
Scorpion like fireballs him out of it, right? Like,
I know, I know. Yeah, I mean, Nick in the chat says that Doug is 100 times better than any family for motivation. I know, and it's so much less time. How much screen time does that dog have, right? Compared to the amount of screen time and like plot mechanics that are dedicated to Cole's incredibly rote family that are
yeah, I was
like,
gonna say, like, it
oh,
can work. It just needs, you don't need as much as they give it, right? Like,
yeah.
that, are like, maybe give it more, like make them more like compelling somehow, right? Like, I don't know. I thought they were like two of the best actors in the film, which is kind of sad, but um I believe that the wife like was mad about things, right? Like more than I believed anything else from anybody else. Um uh but
One moment I really did enjoy though. Somebody pointed this out on the movie details Reddit, but I laughed when I saw this. Was when Kano first fights Liu Kang, and he keeps tripping him over and over again. And somebody on the movie details subreddit was like, in a reference to players
yeah,
in
scrub
fighting
quotes,
games
yeah, yeah.
who, who use one move over and over again, but you don't know how to block it, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, no,
I thought
it
that
was
was
like
pretty funny.
the essential scrub quotes moment, right? Kano's being a scrub. It's like, yeah, stop using that move.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh man, I
even
hope,
Kano's like betrayal I thought was pretty dumb and stupid,
yeah,
because there's nothing about Cabal. They pay lip service to Black Sun, or Black, is it Black Sun? Black Dragon, the mercenary company, which I think is more important in the Mortal Kombat lore than just as a piece of Kano's backstory. Like, I think it's actually a part of a lot of people's backstory. But then Cabal shows up and like talks to Kano for 5 seconds, and Kano swaps sides, and it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah. So Scrub Quotes the Twitter account did retweet that post, which makes me very happy.
That's good stuff. I feel like it almost like makes me wonder like what is a good. I mean, because we've talked about video game movies a bunch, and like I think maybe only Detective Pikachu is like truly good of all of them.
Yeah.
Maybe I would put Warcraft up there, but I just like really love Warcraft. Warcraft has some of these same problems, but I think the Warcraft lore is fundamentally good and not stupid,
I was
which
gonna
is
say
why I give it a pass.
Warcraft isn't necessarily a video game movie, right? Like it's like the video game is the medium on how you tell the Warcraft story, right? Like the
Yeah,
fighting games have like this thing where like the premise is kind of inherently video gamey, right? Like it's like a fighting tournament is like the real
it is
version.
almost always a fighting tournament too,
The,
because
the,
like
the real version of a fighting
Tekken,
game
Street
is like a
Fighter,
sports.
DOA. Yeah.
It's like a sports movie, right?
Mm.
Like it which can work, but it's like they're trying to tell a sports movie like a fantasy movie, right? Like which is not quite right, right?
You know what actually would be a good version of this is Soul Calibur. The Soul Calibur story does not include a tournament, but
Yeah,
it does include Soul Edge, which is like the MacGuffin
right,
that people want because when you beat somebody you get it or whatever. Um and like Soul Calibur 2 actually has a very good story which like goes point by point through each of the sort of individual fights just because it is like these characters like happen to bump into each other and they are
right.
fighting over Soul Edge or information about Soul Edge. I think like you can definitely make that sort of thing work, but with Mortal Kombat where the premise itself is a fucking tournament, it just like seems very weird that they wouldn't go with that as like a plot structure.
Yeah, like do like $1 Million Baby, but like following Liu Kang or something, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Creed or whatever, but
yeah,
following, like, and I think you can still do the ensemble thing, which is something that that I enjoy, right? And why I mentioned like shonen, like the thing that makes shonen tournament arcs when they happen like good, like when I was watching like Yu-Gi-Oh, one of the things that makes the final tournament in Yu-Gi-Oh compelling is that like you then get to watch, you know Pegasus pull out his cool tricks against Kaiba, and now Yugi has to adapt to those same tricks, right? Like you watch the fight happen with an ensemble character, like a supporting character in the cast, so which builds tension towards the big main fight, right? If I watch whoever, you know, Cell kick the shit out of Piccolo, that adds so much more drama for when Goku is then going to go fight Cell. Does it make sense?
yeah. Plus, it's like it's just the fight, right? Like it's a clean kind of like face off, right? Like rather
Yeah.
than kind of a couple people, like mitigating factors, right? Like that's like especially because like a lot of like there's like this kind of like very much just like little kid like who would win in a fight, Goku versus Superman, right? Like you need like an even playing field for that to like work, right? And that's essentially what's happening, right? Like it's it's uh it's Baku versus I can't remember any of the names of My Hero Academia characters, but like their tournament arc works that way too, right? Like
Yeah, yeah. It's
uh
just a big open, square.
yeah. Um Yeah, Nick points out there's only been a tournament in half the games, which that makes sense. But like, it's kind of the inciting incident of the world, right? Like, I guess you could make a Mortal Kombat movie that's just about like Outworld fighting Earthrealm,
Hmm.
but like then you'd have to like not have the tournament. Like the tournament's kind of like it's like the inciting incident, so you have to at least do the tournament, get past that, right? Like like get into like this stuff in order for it to make a modicum of sense. I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe.
this is the thing that makes the Soul Calibur movies a little bit interesting because like there is something to fight about that is not tournament related,
Yeah.
whereas in most of these other premises for like fighting game premises, really the only thing that matters is the tournament, right? Like in DOA, you can read in the backstory of all of these dead or alive characters and what they're fighting for and why they're fighting for what they're fighting for. But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the prize money. They're just different, they are a bunch of different people fighting in different ways for prize money. Um, which it doesn't feel like Mortal Kombat has. Like, what motivates the characters of Mortal Kombat to fight one another besides this otherworldly tournament?
I mean, they all have their individual reasons, but it's also kind of like this movie does away with that by making the mark a thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think I don't know if this is true in the games, but the first movie, like Johnny Cage is kind of just proving that he's like actually, like a serious fighter. He's not just like some like movie star jock, right? Like he can actually fight. Um, uh, or like and
As a marketing stunt. That's actually pretty funny. I didn't know that.
what's up? Sorry,
Well, because he's based on Jean Claude Van Damme, right?
I don't know if that is maybe.
That's my understanding.
Huh.
Do 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 do. Show me. I
It
feel
is
like
John
I'm right
Claude.
about this.
You are correct.
Okay, yeah. It's just like a little piece of trivia that I felt like.
Yeah. Oh, but you know what? This is funny because then Jean Claude Van Damme plays Guile in the Street Fighter movie, and Guile is very very American, and Jean Claude Van Damme is like very French, which is very funny.
Yeah. um. Yeah, like because if the thing that is interesting about like or I'm sorry, if the thing that is motivating Johnny Cage to join the tournament is that he wants to like prove that he's not just an action movie guy, that he can do his own stunts or whatever, I think that's actually pretty compelling, right? Like it's a very straightforward basic reason for him to be involved in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean they all have like
Which
like Sonya and Jax like are basically like what they are. Like they have essentially their motives intact in this movie,
mhm.
right? And like can't like they all have the same motivations. They just don't do the tournament, right? Like we've been over this, but like yeah,
Yeah.
that's basically
It
it.
feels like there's just not a ton to talk about. Are we just like done talking about Mortal Kombat? Because it's just like there's not enough here. I do want to point out that I think his name is Hiroyuki Sanada, the guy who plays Scorpion. I love this guy. He's a fantastic actor, and I want him in so many more things. Uh,
Oh, so what I wanted to say, something I want to say is I think that Christopher Lambert was a better Raiden than this guy, at least as like a character. Uh,
I know this guy because he plays Japanese he plays Japanese generals in a bunch of World War II movies. There was a not too long ago I watched a couple of different World War II movies where like the Japanese Navy played a major part and he was always in them. And I was like, who the fuck is this guy? And then I looked him up and I was like, oh my god, I just watched him in like three separate films. It might not be World War II movies. I think he's the Japanese admiral in the Battleship movie, which I watched and was insanely done. Also a video game movie, I guess,
um,
to talk about
Battleship is a
video game
board
movies.
game, right? Like
Oh yeah, I guess that's fair. It's a board game.
we
It's a
need to
board game
review the
movie.
Dungeons and Dragons movie.
That movie is kind of a trip, and also maybe so bad it's good, just because, boy, what the fuck. And then there's Midway is the big one, which I think is Roland Emmerich's World War II movie about the Battle of Midway in the Pacific, which is actually, to be honest, a very good movie, and not ironic given that he is the Independence Day guy who is famous for his bad movies, like the one where he talks about how Shakespeare isn't Shakespeare.
Apparently, he was also in Thor Ragnarok as Hogun, whoever that is.
Oh yeah, he's one
He's
of the
the Asian.
Warriors 3.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Uh, do I recognize anybody else? Uh, not a lot. Weird. Um, no, he's in 47 Rona, and he's Lord Kira. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I don't know. Like, so obviously, Christopher Lambert's the wrong, the wrong ethnicity.
Ethnicity.
Yeah. um, but he like, I like he was at least like he had like I don't know. I think part of it's just like Raiden doesn't do a lot in this movie, right? Like he doesn't
Yep.
fight anything. He just kind of like does like lightning poses and like it doesn't deliver his lines super convincingly to me at least. Yeah. Not that he was particular like he was it was funny in the first movie, right? Like or that it's Christopher Lambert and then like in Annihilation it's a different actor, also like a white dude with white hair. But it's that's like kind of like an inherent absurdity to it, but like
Do you have a favorite like who's your favorite Mortal Kombat character? Do you ever play Mortal Kombat games? Do you have a favorite character?
so I was actually talking to a couple friends of the cast about this, but like I'm not big into it just because like none of the there's no like strong kind of like iconic grappler, at least that plays the way that I expect grapplers to play. Um, like I liked Aaron Black, which is like a new character for like I think it was MK11 or MKX, who's like a cowboy that like shoots coins. But I just kind of like the aesthetic. This is kind of the thing where it's like you generally like you have to fall in love with the character's aesthetic and then hope that the gameplay like melts with you, which kind of like historically when like the character I like doesn't have like mechanics I just kind of fall off of it, which is what happened with Aaron Black.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, but like, but like, uh, I guess I kind of like Kano, but like that's just purely based on me loving him in the first movie, right? Like he wasn't as good as he is in this movie, but he's still kind of like cheesy in a way that I like. But I never found his mechanics compelling. I just don't play a lot of Mortal Kombat. Also because I find like the input's not super great. Like like
I
historically,
always felt like Mortal Kombat was a lot less competitive than a lot of the other fighting games. Like you have less of this, It's the same thing. I mean, it's the same studio that does like the Injustice games. Like I love those games, and I think that they're a lot of fun, and fun to play. But the it just doesn't feel as competitive as something like Street Fighter or like Smash,
yeah. I mean,
or even Tekken or Soul Calibur kind of thing.
it can be, but it's historically been kind of like it's first of all it's a Western game, right? Like it's NetherRealm's a
Yeah.
Western studio. It's also been consistently defined by being, um, not Street Fighter, right? It has a block button purely because Street Fighter is hold back to block.
Wait,
Um,
really?
yeah, like that's kind of like the only reason why it's that way. Um, and this has been like admitted at some point, right? Like that, like it's a way to differentiate us from them. It's also gorier, right? Um,
Okay.
and so like because it's Western, it doesn't get as much of an international following, and that's kind of like what drives a lot of this. Um, it's definitely a serious game at like higher levels of play, but like it's also kind of like like the things that make Mortal Kombat are like the silly things like the fatalities, right? Fatalities are like they're not anti-competitive in the same way that like they don't make it like bad at being competitive like items in Smash do, but like when you're running a tournament, you don't want to spend 15 seconds waiting for someone to like do a cool button input and like play a stupid animation, right? You just want to move to the next round.
Yeah.
Um,
By the time a fatality is activated, somebody won, right?
yeah,
Like the match is over and now we have to spend 20 seconds on a cutscene basically. And I do think that that's like in the 90s where I'm going over to my friend Billy Hughes' house
we're in the
and we're
arcade.
playing, Mortal Kombat on his N64 or whatever, right? Like that's fun. It is fun to like watch your fatality and kind of like revel in your victory. But I definitely agree with you, like the sitting on the victory screen for that long, which is essentially what a fatality is not fun or interesting.
Yeah, I mean, or in the arcade, right? Like because also like these comes about when like these things are kind of like not widely known. Like the internet's not as much of a thing. Like you can't like not everybody knows every fatality by heart, right? Like, it's kind of impressive thing to do to it's like the thing that the teens oh Billy's so cool he knows the fatalities type of deal. Also like you're paying for games in the arcade, so things work like it's a different environment. But yeah, yeah. Um, although Mortal Kombat has been an Evo historically, I'm wondering if that'll. So I don't know if you heard about. We can transition, I guess, a little bit into some weird stuff, but like,
Sure.
um,
Evo got bought recently,
yeah,
right?
by
Isn't that
Sony,
isn't that the thing?
by
Whoa.
yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, it's like,
Okay.
what does this mean? Like, they say on their website, first of all, it's going to be online again this year, which I don't blame them. There was also like, I don't know if you remember, but there was some controversy. It was either last year or the year before, where like one of the founders was like, pay kids to go like dive into a pool in their underwear or something, and it was just like, ah, what?
That's great. It's
Yeah.
not good, I
Uh,
guess.
yeah, and so and so it's an online tournament, and they say on their site that it's gonna be for all consoles, right? It's not gonna be like a Sony exclusive thing, but um, it'd be interesting to talk to somebody like this is like an internal FGC thing. Might be interesting to see if we could like maybe talk to friend of the cast Barry about something like this because I know he's interested in kind of mechanics. But like
Yeah.
the FGC historically has been all open, like the big tournaments have all been open, and
Mm.
you play through them, and so like doing esports coverage of them is historically kind of tough because any given match isn't interesting, right? It's like two, normies. And so like they will like you'll pull like famous players onto a stage, or like you'll do randoms on the stage and you'll do it that way, but that's not always compelling content. So
Yeah.
like the Capcom sponsored tournaments are or like the ones that Capcom runs directly are invitationals typically. Um and I think the way they're doing Evo Online this year is it's like the pre-rounds uh are like they're open, but like historically at Evo the finals are the interesting thing, right? Like um I went to Evo one year, and the way they did it that year, and I think the way they've been doing it for a while is in you play the opening rounds of the convention center, and then the finals are all on the stage in Mandalay Bay, where you at
Right.
least have some competition. And I think it's a very cool setup, right? Because like every once in a while, some rando makes his way into the top 8, and it's like that's impressive, and I think that's part of the magic. Although I think the other perspective is like well, that guy usually ends up like finishing in the bottom of the top 8, and was it really worth putting him there? But that's kind of like an attitudinal thing. There's also some like weird history there. Like if I remember correctly, one year, like the first like one year, Evo decided to let like Major League Gaming in, and they like pushed fighting games off to the side and like ran a bunch of FPS stuff, and everybody hated it. And so Evo's always been independent. It's refused esportification for a very long time. Um, and as a result, doesn't like pull in as much money, right? Like FGC is like kind of like naturally positioned to be like a at least profitable venture, right? Because like it got like individual stories, a lot of individual skill, right? Like there's like personalities around it, right? Like Daigo. But it just kind of never historically captured kind of that esports attention, esports money. Um, there's been like talks about like the behavior of the community for years, right? Like I remember when Capcom like was first getting like interested in like trying to make like esport like FGC esports a real thing. It was like we might have to modify how Evo runs. Like there were stories that like people would like do money. You know what a money match is? It's exactly what it sounds like, right? Like it's like people like betting personally on matches between each other. Like you would apparently have people like throwing down money on like foot races in the convention center, like just two people like running down the hall. Like um, what was the euphemism they used? There was a euphemism that they used that I can't maybe it was thuggery. I don't know. There was some like it's been a whole mess. So that's all I don't know. Super interesting to me. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's that is interesting, and I wonder if we will see, because I definitely know that there are esport organizations that like sponsor certain fighters, right? Like
yeah.
like TSM or CLG will have like somebody on their roster
Cloud
who is
Nine sponsors Mango, the professional Smash player.
yeah. Or like Leffen, I think is also a professional Smash player who's sponsored by TSM. Like
Yeah.
those kinds of like those kinds of interactions. So I don't- I sort of wonder what the like the real market for the FGC is like moving forward, because I do think one of the things that I find interesting about sort of the death of StarCraft 2 over the course of its esports lifetime is that that game sort of became so competitive that it was not interesting anymore, right? Where like the efforts that the developers added to make the distinction between good players and bad players clear um became so advanced that you just couldn't be a spectator really, in the game anymore. And so I do think that there is the possibility for games like that to die, genres like that, honestly, to sort of die out as an esport, as like they kind of optimize themselves into sort of like irrelevance. For WoW, for instance, is another good example of this. The competitive WoW esport right now is probably the world first race or the MDI. It is much less like the Arena World Champions, for instance, because like, WoW PvP is fun and people play it a lot and everything like that, but like the real competitive eye is now on this other facet of the game, for instance. And so like I think that there is sort of like a danger as things evolve, as like esports as a community evolve, and as like the FGC sort of like phases people in and out, maybe, that kind of like Evo loses its steam, and you need to react to some of these things. But who knows, I
See,
guess.
this is interesting because I like I think I kind of agree with you. I think one advantage that fighting games have is that they're kind of inherently legible, right? Like even if you don't know
Hmm.
exactly what's happening, you can see two people beating each other up. You might not
Yeah.
understand exactly why, like certain hits land in the same way that, like, in an MMA fight, right? Like, you don't need to understand the technicality to enjoy watching people beat each other up. Something that people are worried about is that newer games do a lot to like make the game more accessible to a wider crowd, which is I think an
Hmm.
attempt to counter this. But the fear is that if things are too legible and too well understood, then there's not enough way for a good player to not necessarily like distinguish themselves, but like just distinguish themselves from another high level player. Like two high level players being able to like build their own personality, like their own personal style around, um, you know, differentiations of skill or like little weird things around the frame data, right? Like things that they're good at that maybe other players aren't, that give them competitive advantage. If you make things not necessarily legible is not necessarily the best, like the right way to put it, but like too mechanically simple, then then it's more of a strategy game than it is a fighting game, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
the kind of like nature of fighting games makes that like there's like watching strategy games is like a niche, much more niche thing, right? And like can't do it in the same way, if that makes sense. Um, I didn't hold this like the part of the appeal of a fighting game is kind of like the skill component, right? Like the description that I think is what's salient is like speed chess with a execution requirement. Um, and if you make that execution requirement too low, then then you're missing out on a significant part of what makes fighting games compelling. I think from like a watcher standpoint, right? Like you don't want uh you want two people entering the ring to have like enough differences that you can talk about their differences, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge thing that defines certain other esports, right? Like Hearthstone or WoW esports. You get that by the nature of sort of like class specializations or whatever, right? If you're running in the MDI with a boomkin versus running with an unholy death knight or whatever, I can make as a caster or something, right? Like I can talk about how like, oh, like that's this person is famous for this thing, right? And in fighting games, I think that comes through like character choices, right? Like, are you good at this type of character, or do you specialize at Fox, or do you specialize at Jigglypuff or whoever, right? um but there's always a danger of the meta and balance when it comes to that sort of thing, right? Where, if you don't want to end up in a situation where everything is a mirror match because the only competitive characters all look and play the exact same. Does it make sense?
Yeah, or are the exact same. This was a thing early in Street Fighter Five's life cycle. Like I think that this was like the Evo that I went to. Um,
Hmm.
like I think the top eight was like six Nashes, and like the finals was a Nash mirror. Um,
Wow.
yeah, because he was so dominant at that point. I mean, it's
Yeah,
this.
I think that's the kind of thing that I think is dangerous, and it sucks. And like, people always want to protect against that. They like talk about how, like metas evolve over time, right? Like the melee meta. Melee has obviously never been patched, but like the meta has remained the exact same years on end. Or I'm sorry, the meta has not stayed the exact same thing years on end. It does like change and shift, and that is true. Like that is, I think, like the hallmark of a good game. Even now, right? Like the Hearthstone team came out with a classic version of the game, which is like Hearthstone from 2014. Like when it came out of beta, it is that version of the game snapshotted. Um, and one of the funny things that people are finding is that there's a shaman deck in there that is insanely oppressive and good, and nobody ever played it. In 2014, no one touched this deck or played this deck or got close to this deck. And now people in 2021 are refining this deck and making it really good. Um and like kind of crowding out the competition, which like I think that stuff signals, like what is a good meta, what is a bad meta, if that makes sense. Because like when you're making those kinds of decisions, is uh that's reflective of a certain kind of balance, right? Um, but not all games behave that way, and sometimes you just have games that have an incredibly dominant thing that does incredibly dominant things for its life cycle.
Yeah, yeah. It's it's interesting how those things work out too, because like you said, like Melee's managed to like work itself through, but there's like there's a lot of things to like discover there, right? Like there's like weird ways that things interact that you can theoretically discover that aren't like, but like everything in Hearthstone is set, right? Like you can't like you can discover a new deck combination, but like you can't like get more frames on the deck, right? Like it's not like you can abuse, like you can do something new. It's just kind of like theoretically you can run through all the combinatorics in in Hearthstone to figure out like what the best deck is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like if you give, I don't know, a million computers a million years, they will eventually find the mathematically correct deck, right?
Yeah,
Because they could just run the numbers infinitely. Like I mean, I think Hearthstone has a good ability to do this compared to uh certain other games because of like like um the interaction of like discover or whatever. But any card game is going to be confined by this compared to something like a fighting game where essentially, like, let's say your fighting game is running at 60 frames per second. That means that there are sort of, in a certain sense, 60 individual decision points where something can change and happen differently. A card game just will never have that
yeah,
number of decision points, even with a card game that has access to thousands of cards through a discover tool, that or like random card generation, all that other stuff that we've talked about before. That just won't change the it just won't change the raw numbers of the decision matrix, because at the end of the day, most of your card game turns are play this, play that, play this, play that, right? You only have a handful of options open to you at any time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. What else have you been up to this week?
Man, what have I been up to this week? I have been trying my best to get into the new Stellaris update, but I just like can't bring myself to do it. Which is weird, and it sucks because I haven't played either Necroids or Nemesis. And normally I come back to Stellaris for like the big expansion updates, but they have changed the way that the game behaves in like a pretty fundamental way, and I haven't really wrapped my head around it. Have you hit on Stellaris at all recently?
I haven't played it myself, but friend of the cast X has talked about it a bit. Like they made the population S curve now, so it doesn't explode at the end,
Yeah.
and
Which I
that
do
helps
think
with
is
the
good because, yeah, in the late game of Stellaris, what happens is you get these planets that are just like producing pops like crazy, and they max themselves out. And then you start funneling those pops to colonies, right? And then you're kind of like saturating your empire with these pops or whatever. But I just think that is not good design, generally speaking.
also that
Um,
slows down the game, which is like
and it slows down the game and makes the game like really chug. Like not only does it slow you down because now you're making individual decisions. Like I guess something you can do is just turn off pop growth, right? Every planet has a modifier for this. You don't pay any penalty besides the opportunity cost of not having an extra, like work or whatever. But I never want to do that because you are hamstringing yourself, right?
yeah,
Like an extra worker is huge. Being able to funnel that to a colony so that my colony immediately gets up and running is huge. Um, But then what happens is in the late game, you're just sitting there, just like shuffling pops around constantly, and that's all you're doing. You're not like the thing that makes Solaris, I think, a good game is the systems management, where you are, managing the rates of acquisition of all these different, inputs and outputs. I think that that's like super fun and compelling gameplay, kind of the bedrock of what makes Solaris good. But you know, it when it just gets into that sort of micromanaging population territory, that then it is less fun. In the chat says, Nick says, if I recall correctly, the chug was how it handled unfulfilled jobs, where it checks each available pop whether it would be better in that job. So if you had perfect employment, it wouldn't chug, but it does this for both player and AI. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me, especially because I know that the AI in that game sometimes has a hard time filling. Players optimize their systems and their empires pretty routinely, but the AI in that game does not do as good a job, and will sometimes have planets with tons of uh, unpopulated, uh, or unemployed pops rather.
Yeah. Um, yeah. On my side, I jumped back into or I jumped into Warzone. Warzone released an update.
Oh yeah, tell
Yeah,
me all about it.
yeah. So they blew up. They blew up Verdansk with a nuke. And then like they had like a night where like it was like, oh, we're gonna release a new map tomorrow. It's a mystery, and they had you there's like a small map they use sometimes. It's like an island off the coast. It's like much smaller, and they actually had this cool what I thought was a pretty neat mechanic, which is called Rebirth, which is instead of the the traditional way that like the Warzone works, which is you get one chance in the gulag and then you can be brought back. Is if your teammates survive for long enough, you will automatically respawn for most of the match. And it's like 30 to 40 seconds, and if you kill people, the time goes down. So it's a much more intense and faster running thing, and I thought it was a lot of fun. And then they revealed the map, which I thought was a little disappointing. Um,
Really?
well, so first of all, when they were nuking Verdansk, there was like a 2 hour event in game that was apparently really crazy. It was at like 3 p.m. Eastern, so like no one got to do it, and the server was like crashed for like half of it. Um, but so like they play the cutscene and they literally it's literally a flashback. They just rewind time and it's like a flashback to the 80s, which makes sense because of Black Ops, right? That's the current game. So it's
Okay.
Verdansk, but in the 80s. And there's some neat stuff that happens there,
Do
right?
they change like the weapons and stuff? Is it like 80s versions of all the
Well,
guns?
it's the Black Ops weapons on the map. Um,
Oh, that would make sense. Duh.
yeah.
Okay.
And there's some neat stuff, right? Like the airport's crumbled in the modern map, and it's together in the past map. But like I don't know, it felt a little disappointing to me because it's just kind of like, oh, it's mostly the same map, it's but a little different. Um, but yeah, it's always a fun thing to jump back into. I also ended up playing a bunch of the multiplayer, just because I was playing Warzone. I was like, oh, I could play some multiplayer. Um, I'm not sure how. So the way that you like post like your level through like all the new weapons, you
Mhm.
get by like doing things in game, right? Like a couple of them are like get to a certain level on the pass, and then I think they changed to a different acquisition. Uh, or you can or like some of them are like get 3 kills with a submachine gun in 15 different games. 3 kills without dying in 15 different games. It's usually like in 15 different. And so it's like that's like a fun thing to like work through, right? Like, um, but like you can also get them by buying a blueprint, with money, right? So that feels a little not great, but you know,
Yeah, that sounds like pay to win, I guess,
I mean,
in a roundabout way.
yeah, it's also not really win because like it's not like these weapons are better, although it gets close. Like apparently the very meta weapon right now is one of these guns, and it's an assault rifle, and the way you unlock it is you get 2 headshots with assault rifles, 2 headshot kills with assault rifles in 15 different games. And you don't have to do it in one life, but like at least I find like getting headshots with assault rifles isn't the easiest thing in the world. It's not terrible, but it's like very tempting to like hit that button, especially if you want to like be competitive, right? So I also
Yeah,
find that.
that's an interesting thing that I remember one of the things that Ben Brode used to talk about with Hearthstone, because they it was there was this question of like can we add achievements to Hearthstone? And something that Ben Brode said at the time was, he thinks that achievements in PvP games like that are actually not good. They are frustrating because it forces you to opt into a lot of the times like inferior play styles. So like in Hearthstone terms, this is I am trying to, get the, win the game with all 4 shaman totems out or something like that. And I'm playing shaman, which maybe isn't a meta class, and I'm like trying to do this thing, but like my opponent is playing the tier 1 super good awesome deck, and that's just a really unfun experience. There's also the League version of this that people asked if League could have achievements, and I'm pretty sure this was at the time Morello, who was the game director on League, said that they don't want to do that because you don't want to be in the game with someone who needs to hit 20 bandage tosses on a Moo and like is all
Yeah.
his only concern is not winning and losing. It's hitting his bandage tosses, right? Um, which is a question. And funnily enough, both of those games have actually gone back on that and now have achievement systems. In Hearthstone, you have the whatever those trees are called, the Elder trees or something like that. They got added after you and I stopped playing, but it's a thing where it's like it tracks your cool in-game statistics or whatever. And then in Hearthstone, they have achievements that are there. They're just fucking achievements. I don't know. I guess they got over that that thought
No,
process.
I think so in Hearthstone, I think I agree with it would be frustrating, but at least you're not penalizing anybody else. You're doing it to yourself,
Yeah.
right? And this is the thing about like Call of Duty as well, right? I don't think it's much of a problem in Call of Duty because any individual game of Call of Duty is throwaway. Like who cares, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I do find it frustrating sometimes, right? Like like there's one like to unlock one of the sniper rifles, you need to get 2 long shots with sniper rifles in in a match, and the difficulty there is that a lot of the matches or a lot of the maps don't have enough like long sight lines to get a long shot on a sniper rifle, right? Because they're naturally long weapons, so be really long in order to get a long shot medal. Um, and yeah, I find that frustrating, but like from another player perspective, who cares, right? Like also
Yeah.
very cynically, that's trying to drive people to buy the things, right? Like instead of um uh
Yeah. I also feel like 2 headshots with an assault rifle is not all that bad. It's not
yeah, it's not the worst. Like the
like that's like contracts, right? Or like quests in Hearthstone, right? Like just small, you can design those to be pretty painless, right? Like you're gonna do the thing anyway, so maybe you alter your play style a tiny bit. I'm gonna take an assault rifle this time instead of taking my typical SMG shotgun or whatever it is. But like at the end of the day, you're still trying to get headshots. It's not like
yeah
you're
yeah
you're you're not trying to get headshots with an assault rifle.
yeah. So the most so I will tell you that the like that's actually the most frustrating one is getting 2 long shot medals with a sniper rifle, just because there's not always a ton of opportunity to do that, right? Um like the to unlock the crossbow, it's get um 3 one shot, 1 kills with a weapon with no attachments on it, 15 different matches, and that was like pretty easy, right? Because like the sniper rifles all come with a scope on them by like like without an attachment on them. So like it just like get 3 kills with the sniper rifle, right? Which is easy. Like most of the sniper rifles have like at least like chest or head one shot, 1 kills. So that
Yeah.
was easy. And then the ballistic knife was like it was a little tougher. Was get a one shot, 1 kill and a melee kill in the same life, which was a little bit like and doing anything that requires you to do it in one life is more aggravating, right? Like
Yeah.
um because you have to be good, right? So like um oh not the end of the world. Like I don't think any of them are that bad. It's just it's very grindy, right? Like 15 matches is a lot of matches. Um and like but unlike playing for a while and not making progress is also kind of frustrating. But it's fine. I don't think it's terrible. It's like annoying enough that you might spend money on it, but not so annoying that it's oppressive. Um, but yeah. What else did I do? I checked out Olia, which is like an independent game published by Devolver Digital. It's like a Metroidvania. A little fun. It's pretty fun. I haven't dug too deeply into it, but it's spelled Olija for anybody at home who wishes to find it. It's very stylish. Um, uh,
Huh. Look at this.
yeah, it's a neat game. I recommend it so far. It's very Metroidvania-y, and I love that kind of game. So
Yeah,
anything from
I played a bunch of indie games actually over the last couple of weeks. I was actually a jury member on for an indie game convention. So I like they sent me a bunch of games and they were like, "Hey, play these and pick your favorite for whatever the category is." Just like to decide what the thing is. So I actually ended up playing like a bunch of small games. Like one of them is called Rain on Your Parade, which is sort of a version of like the Untitled Goose Game, but where you're a little rain cloud and you can like rain on things, like on people or on you know just stuff. And like so I played a bunch of it. It's like Rain on Your Parade, the signifier, speed limit, interrogation, you will be deceived, not for broadcast, isn't it? Have you seen Not for Broadcast?
no.
That one is like marginally well known. I have seen people talk about that one. That one is you are a you're like the live video engineer of like an 80s newsroom. So you're like putting VHSs into things and you're
I
cutting
think I
from
have heard of
camera
this.
1 to
Yeah, yeah.
camera 2 or whatever. But it's all like in this sort of like farcical black comedy. One of the big ones that I played was called World Splitter, which is my award was for innovation. And my pick for the most innovative game was World Splitter, which was a platformer where there were sort of two phases of reality, right? And on one phase you would have certain things, and on another phase you had other things, right? Like maybe maybe there's like a thing standing straight up and but it's knocked over in the other reality, and you control the two realities with your cursor. There's like a line and you can pass the line over your character to swap yourself from reality A to reality B. And then there's also like other little kid, like you can rotate the line or whatever. But it was just like an insanely clever little like puzzle game. Almost, it wasn't even really a platformer. It was mostly, I would say, a puzzle game, because all of the like getting through was just about how do you phase yourself into the correct zone, and do you do this thing or that thing, right? Like, one of the tricks that took me almost that took me a couple of minutes to like figure out is that, like, if there is wall in the other zone, you can angle the line such that it's like a ramp and walk your guy up on the ramp or whatever. And it's just like small stuff like that. It was just so clever, and I was just like, this is what I love. This is what I want to see.
Very cool. Is so I remember seeing you tweet a couple weeks ago. It's like this is the first time I've stayed up all night playing a game. Is that one of those games?
That was not for that game. That was for another game called Cardboard Kings. Man, I love that game.
Is that a game that you guys publish, or is it
That is the game. Do you know Desert Child in our
yeah.
library?
Yeah, I kickstarted
It
Desert
is.
Child.
Yeah. Desert Child is by a guy named Oscar Britton. His next game is called Cardboard Kings, which is like a shop simulator, sort of like Recettear or something like
Okay.
that, but where you manage a card shop for a game called like Warlock, which is like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, one of those.
Yeah.
So you like put cards up, like singles of cards. Those cards fluctuate in value, obviously. Yeah, that game, because we know Oscar, I was playing a demo of it. There's actually a demo up on Steam that like you could go play right now. And I had to play it because I was going to talk to somebody about that at work, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to play this tomorrow morning, but I know there's like a tutorial, like there's like a 15-minute tutorial, because I played the demo a long time ago, and I was like, I'll just play through the tutorial tonight. And this was like at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was just like, I'll quickly play through the tutorial and then and set myself up so that tomorrow when I jump into the game, I just like jump right into it. And then I stayed up till like 5 a.m. It's so addicting, in those sorts of games to just go like one more, turn or whatever the case may be.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah.
Have
What
you done
else?
any like WoW stuff? We're just progressing on Denathrius. We're 60, 70 pulls into Denathrius at this point.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Are you frustrated at all that we haven't got AOTC yet?
I wouldn't say so. Like, I don't know. I still find it fun. Like,
Hmm.
it's maybe kind of like the robe, like having to get to. So the for those who haven't been following along at home, the part that we got to is in the phase 3 of Denathrius. these 3 orbs come down and you have to soak them or something, and it wasn't exactly clear exactly how we had to do it. It took us a little while to figure that out. And I think the most frustrating part is like getting to that point and then failing and then not understanding why we failed, and like, having to go through like the 7 minutes of fight to that part, then try and figure out what we're doing wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, Denathrius might be the hardest AOTC fight I have done maybe ever. Maybe Gul'dan was also this hard. Gul'dan was a very hard AOTC fight, which I don't think I enjoy, to be honest. I think N'Zoth was a tough AOTC fight, but it was very rewarding. And I was tanking on that fight, which was a little bit different, obviously, than Denathrius, where I'm like a member of like the DPS. But it feels like there are just a lot of places in the Denathrius fight where you're dead. That's it.
Yeah.
You lose. Which is like, I don't know. N'Zoth was maybe bad. If I were to explain like all the mechanics in N'Zoth to you, you might say that that it's like bad or unfun. But the fourth phase, the third phase in the N'Zoth fight was kind of defined by RNG, because what happens is he shoots out he spawns these eyes, right? And what happens is, in the final phase, every 20 seconds, every player drops a pool under their feet, right? And every time a player drops the pool, the uh the all of the other pools that have originally spawned grow in size. So it is like slowly filling up like the whole room. And then the other mechanic that he has is he has these eye lasers. Like, he spawns these eyes and they shoot a laser, and the laser rotates. And the direction that it rotates is random. And where we got to on AOTC on Pulls of N'Zoth was, we start that phase and we lust, because the first pool you just do a tiny little sidestep, no issue. And then the eyes spawn like 10 or 15 seconds into that lust phase, and if the eyes push you back into the pools that you have been going to, you lose, because then you have to run out and around these pools and it takes forever and you're wasting your lust, and you lose. You can't get them down fast enough, right? But if the lasers spawn and they go in the right direction, then you win, because you get the full duration of your whole lust onto N'Zoth's face, and then you've pushed enough DPS that you can kind of like get through. Which, like, that sounds bad when I explain it, because it sounds like it's just, oh, the defining factor is like RNG or whatever. It's just whether or not the laser's right or left. But like, in the moment, that's like a very tense thing. And it's like, it just like felt good to like push through and like and make the DPS check, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that does make sense. The Nathries doesn't feel as bad as Stone Legion Generals did, though. So I'm like, I don't know. I feel like Stone Legion Generals, part of it is like there's a lot of like not doing things, and it's just kind of like annoying. Where like the intermissions are annoying. The like, whereas Nathries is like, it's like I don't like. It's like, my little my weak aura that says that my potions back up pops like, oh shit, I've been doing this for 5 minutes, and it doesn't feel like you're doing nothing most of the time. So
Yeah.
good.
And you also feel the effects of pushing, which I think is nice.
Yeah.
Like, having to pull DPS off on Denathrius doesn't feel as bad as it does in Stone Legion Generals. Because in Stone Legion Generals, it's not like, if I'm doing so good that I have to drop off, we have to pull back our DPS, that's fine. Because like, at least I get the kind of like, well, we're killing it, we're pumping right now, right? But on Stone Legion Generals, where it's just like, well, you gotta walk away from the boss, or else you're gonna get this stupid bleed that's gonna take forever. Like, I just hate that so much.
All like for me too, it's like, you could keep punching the boss, doesn't take damage if you want to keep your numbers up for the for the meter. It's like, I don't want to, but it's gonna make me sad when my number drops down. So
Yeah, I mean, that's the nice part about being ranged, because a lot of the times I'm coming on range now. I mean, it's funny that I have 2 characters at 220 at this point. Who are both kind of like heroic raid capable, but yeah, it is. I don't know. It's neat. Though I will say, I played a bunch of the PTR, and dude, the PTR is 9.1 is drams AF as they say, when it
Ooh.
comes to the story stuff. And I wasn't sure if I was going to have a good time doing this, but I have decided that this was the correct thing to do, because otherwise I just would have read the spoilers on Wowhead and made myself sad not having played through it. Because, like, I think the best way to experience the game is to not pay attention to this shit and just like move on. But like, I'm so, like, I'm watching WoW YouTubers and like streamers and stuff like this, like, and I'm pretty saturated in an environment that will talk about spoilers, and I won't be able to stop myself. So doing it on the PTR, where like I can do it before I spoil myself, and at least you get, it's not everything is quite solid on the PTR. Like, sometimes they change wording, or they'll have cutscenes that don't play correctly, that kind of stuff. But at least you still kind of get the story as if you were playing it. It's just so much nicer than like reading it in, or like watching a YouTube video where someone goes, "Oh fuck, this crazy lore thing happened." Um, so
Yeah,
there's that.
neat. It sounds super neat. Um,
I've also played a bunch of Outriders, but we're going to talk about that later. So
yeah,
we don't have to talk about that
yeah,
now.
we're putting off Outriders again. Yeah, sorry about missing last week. Personal emergency on my part. Um, but we will talk about Outriders at some point. Maybe I would say, like, Falcon and the Winter Soldier also just ended. Probably do that at some point. We also probably do Mando season 2.
Mando season 2, 6 months old, 6-month anniversary. You got
Yeah, this is my fault. Because I have not rewatched. Have you watched season 2?
Yeah, I
Okay, yeah.
watched season 2 of Mando.
Tyler,
I have not watched Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I'm kind of loath to be honest at this point, because I've been mildly spoiled for a number of stupid things on Twitter that make me feel like I'm not going to enjoy it, but we'll see.
yeah, no, I mostly want to watch it because I want to be up to date for Loki, which is the thing I'm really interested in. Which probably doesn't. I don't need to watch it, but that's the way I am, right? Like,
Yeah.
So we'll do Outriders next week, I guess. Yeah, right. That's the only thing I kind of on my radar in terms of things to be super excited for. Yeah. Uh, that's everything I have, I guess. Buddy, you have anything else you want to talk about before we?
I do have one mild promotion, which is that there's going to be a Buddy Gets Good episode this Friday. So
Hey,
tune in 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. I don't
right.
actually remember what I'm supposed to play, but it's on the schedule somewhere, so I'll go check that later. I think it might be another voice acted session of The Dark Side Detective,
Ooh.
because obviously that game just came out.
All right. Well, if you'd like to email us, tell us what you think about any of the things we talked about today, from Mortal Kombat to WoW stuff. Email us at subversivegames@gmail.com or podcast@subversivegames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/subversivegames for these episodes go out live. Like and review us on podcast places. Subscribe to us on YouTube, all that good stuff. And you already did your promotion. So with that, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.